Today we are going to be reading a fairy tale. Now some of you may have heard of this story before, Jack and the Beanstalk. Like I said, our story is a fairy tale, which means it's an old story with characters that can do amazing things. Our text focus as we're reading through our story is that many fairy tales have storytelling phrases such as once upon a time and happily ever after. Find these words as we read in our story. How do they make you feel? Why do you think the storyteller uses them? So let's get ready to read our story, Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack. He and his mom had no money for food because someone had taken their goose. Sometimes it would lay golden eggs for them. Jack went to sell their cow. He met a man. "I will trade these special beans for your cow," the man said. Wow, so from just reading the first half of our story, I have already heard one of the storytelling phrases. Did you hear it too? An example of the storytelling phrases was once upon a time and happily ever after. At the very beginning of our story, it began with once upon a time. What do you think might happen next in our story? We last read that Jack went to sell their cow and he met a man that said, "I will trade these special beans for your cow." What do you think might happen next? Let's see and find out. Jack came home. His mother was mad. She threw the beans on the ground. Soon a tall beanstalk grew. Jack climbed it. At the top was a huge castle. Inside, Jack found his goose in a cage under a table. Then Jack heard, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, look out, here I come." It was a giant! First Jack grabbed the goose. Then he ran right out the door. How do you think Jack is feeling right about now? How would you feel if you heard a giant coming towards you? I would be terrified. Would you? Jack climbed down the beanstalk as fast as he could. He chopped it down. Now Jack and his mother were safe, and they had their goose. They all lived happily ever after. Wow! So when we look at just how tall this beanstalk was, it started here on the ground, and if we turn our page back, it grew all the way up into the sky. Look at this. Look how tall that beanstalk is. We knew there was a giant at the top of this beanstalk. Do you see the giant in the picture? Look closely. The giant was up on the beanstalk. Looks like he was slowly climbing his way down. And oh, good thing Jack decided to cut that beanstalk, because I think that giant was coming down for Jack. Don't you think? At the very end of our story, in our last sentence, it said, they all lived happily ever after. Happily ever after was one of the storytelling phrases it told us to look out for when reading a fairy tale. What a great story about Jack and the Beanstalk. I know some of you may have read that story before. What about other fairy tale stories? Can you think of any other fairy tale stories you may have read before? This morning, during our morning meeting, we talked a little bit more about contractions. A contraction is when you take two different words and put them together using an apostrophe. For example, like the word can't is the words cannot put together. So we are going to read our decodable called What Will We Do? In this story, we may see a few contractions. When you see the word, see if you can figure out what two words put together does it represent. Now let's begin reading our decodable together. What Will We Do? By Mandy Jackson, illustrated by Nicole Wong. It's a hot, hot day. It is too hot to run and play. What can we do? You'll notice that the very first word of our decodable is it's. It's is a contraction. Do you know what it's is made of? The words it is make the contraction its. We'd like to swim, but we can't. Bay Lake isn't open. What'll we do if we can't swim? On this page, we have quite a few contractions. The first one I see is weed. Weed. Weed is a contraction of the two words we would. If you said we would like to swim, that's the same as saying we'd like to swim. Next I see can't. We have talked about this contraction before. Can't is a combination of the two words can not. I also see isn't. Isn't is also a contraction we've seen before. Do you remember what two words make isn't? Is not. There's one more I see on this page. Waddle, waddle. Waddle is the contraction of the two words, what will. The lake has a sign on it that says closed. We can't play on the deck. It has wet paint. What'll we do if we can't play on the deck? The sign says wet paint. We'll read. It'll be fun. Let's sit and read. Can you find the contractions on this page? Will stands for we will. Let's stands for let us. And it'll stands for it will. See if you can find the rest of the contractions in our story. This tale is the best. A big, bad beast chases three nice pigs. It wails and wails. It trails those pigs home. It keeps on wailing and wailing. I think I know that story they're reading. Wait, that's not right. It doesn't wail. It huffs and puffs. Huff, huff, huff. Puff, puff, puff. No, no, no. You must be mixed up. Beasts don't huff and puff. Beasts wail. Well, sometimes beasts huff and puff. This beast huffs and puffs. This beast huffs and puffs and chases you. All right, everybody, to end our lesson, I want us to complete a contractions activity in our reader's notebook. We are going to be working on page 37. So I just circled that page number at the bottom of the screen. We are going to be working on contractions, like I said. So we are working on contractions that end in O and D. Our directions tell us to write a word from the box to finish each sentence. We have an example at the top to help us if we need an example as we're working. The two words I would can be combined into the contraction I'd. We have 5 contractions in the box here. Say them with me. Heed, heed. She'll, she'll. I'd, I'd. They'll, they'll. Weed, weed. We have 5 sentences, each missing a word. We need to see which contraction would best fit in each blank. Before we begin, I want to talk about what each contraction stands for. For the contraction he'd, that is the same as saying he would. She'll is a contraction for she will. I'd is a contraction for I would. They'll is a contraction for they will. And we'd is a contraction for we would. Let's do the first one together. So number 1, it says, Ben said that blank be late today. Ben said that blank be late today. We want to find the contraction that fits best in each sentence. For our first sentence, Ben said that blank be late today, we could look at each of the contractions and see how they fit. Ben said that he'd be late, that she'll be late, that I'd be late, that they'll be late, that we'd be late. In this sentence, we are talking about Ben. So for number 1, our contraction we are going to use is heed. Heed. And we said that heed is a contraction for he would. So we can read the sentence both ways. We can say Ben said that he'd be late today, and also Ben said that he would be late today. And we're only going to use each contraction one time, so you can cross it out when you're done. For number 2, it says, Beth said blank go to the beach. We are talking about Beth in this sentence. So like in number 1, how Ben said that he'd be late. Now we're talking about Beth, a girl. So what do you think would fit best? Beth said she'll go to the beach. Beth said I'd go to the beach. Beth said they'll go to the beach. Beth said we'd go to the beach. Write the contraction in the blank that you would think would fit best. This sentence is about Beth. For number 3, it says, Mom and Dad said blank go out at 5. This sentence is about Mom and Dad, 2 people. So when you are looking at the contractions, look for the contraction that can be used to talk about 2 people. Mom and Dad said blank go out at 5. Number 4 says, Gus said Blink liked to play in the sand. We are talking about Gus in this sentence, and Gus is saying Blink liked to play in the sand. So Gus is talking about himself. For number 4, which contraction would we use if he is talking about himself? Would he say, she will, I would, they will, or we would? Those are the versions of our contractions here. Would Gus say, she'll like to play in the sand? I'd like to play in the sand? They'll like to play in the sand? Or we'd like to play in the sand? If Gus is just talking about himself. And on number 5, it says, we think Blink like a day at the beach. This sentence is talking about 2 people. This sentence is talking about 2 or more people. It says, we think. Which contraction would represent somebody saying we? I know that this is still a new skill we are working on, so we are going to go over and talk about your answers really quick. For number 1, we used the contraction he'd. Ben said that he would be late today. So that one was completed. So I wanted all of you to try and answer the rest of them on your own. So let's see how you did. For number 2, Beth said she will go to the beach. So for number 2, we put she'll, as in she will go to the beach. How are you doing so far? For number 3, we talked about mom and dad. So this one, I feel it could have gone both ways, but I think the best fit would be mom and dad said they'll go out at 5. They will. They'll would be the best fit for number 3. For number 4, Gus said. For this one, we would use I, because this is Gus talking. So if he's talking about himself, he could say I. So Gus said, I would like to play in the sand. And for number 5, we think we would like a day at the beach. We think we'd like a day at the beach. So this was just some practice for us to do to work on our contractions. See if today, when you talk or when you listen to others talk, if you hear them use a contraction. See if you can tell what two words are being combined together to make the contraction. Tomorrow will be our 100th day of school. I am so excited. If you have any questions about your lessons today, please let me know, and I'll see you later.